Michael, if I'm in trouble, so hopefully it's Mike today. Yeah. Really, everyone is on my side. They're like, you know what? I want that subdivision.
Good job. As long as everyone's in the safe, hopefully we'll be fine.
O'clock on March 13th. Kay, would you please read the roll?
Ann Krimmer.
Here.
Jesse Garcia.
Here.
Cindy Suplizio.
Here.
Kim McGee.
Here.
Nick Mission.
Here.
Jeff Davlin. Jarrett Mork.
Here.
Nicholas DeFrank.
Here. Thank you, Kay. Moving on, consent agenda, looking at the minutes from our February 27th meeting. Any comments from the commissioners? As an aside, it's really amazing to see all of you here tonight. My hair is blown back, perhaps, but really awesome to have everybody here. So thank you all. And with that, any comments, any input on the minutes from last meeting?
No, it was very helpful since I missed, so thank you, Kay. And move to approve the minutes.
First, Jared, Jeff, second. Thank you both. I'm guessing you are all here just for comments on random stuff tonight, nothing to do with anything on the agenda. Is that correct, that assumption? Well, in the rare case that one of you is here for public comment on items that is not on the agenda, now would be the time. Seeing that no one is running to the mic, going once, going twice. All right, close public comment. Moving on, action items. 1348 Barber Drive, conceptual plan and preliminary plat. You want to take us in, Jared?
Yeah, I'll keep this relatively short. So as I summarized in the memo at your guys' last meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission provided direction to move forward with quote unquote option B, which was the subdivision alignment where it had kind of irregular lot shapes. So we worked with the applicant. We revised resolution number 2 to include language, conditions of approval related to the approval of that option, included it as an exhibit in the packet. And so essentially what we have before you all tonight is a motion to approve resolution number 2, which would approve the preliminary and conceptual plat. And once again, the next step for this application would be to kind of address some of the minor revisions to the plat and then move forward with a final plat application, which would go to the Board of Trustees for final approval. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, turn it over to Mike. We have John online.
All right.
If you have any questions of the applicant.
I only had one question for staff, a quick one. We discussed the potential of any of those kind of minor lot line adjustments could happen directly with staff and the applicant if things were to move forward. So is that still comfortable with staff?
Yeah, I think kind of what we're talking about are pretty minor in keeping the intent of the preliminary plan.
Yeah.
And so I don't see that being an issue between this approval and the application for a final plat.
Okay, great. All right, anybody else, any other commissioners have questions for staff, clarifications? People who didn't show up last time perhaps might have some information.
I'm not gonna put a stick in these folks. It sounds like there was a pretty good agreement and discussion already.
And got you guys good as well? Everybody good? Okay, with that, Mike, it's all yours. If you wanna step in and walk us into where things are at.
John, you wanna start?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it super brief. We talked quite a lot last time. So, I think we've followed option B. We are working on fixing the lot lines per Jared's comments. We sent him the lot area numbers this morning, and everything looks good. And so we're just waiting on the final edits to the plat by the surveyor. So I think we're in agreement with staff on moving forward with the resolution you have before you. So I don't have anything else to add.
Great, thank you, John.
I just want to apologize for thinking I could get the survey completed in 2 weeks.
Oh, and we talked about it. I had all the
We did.
faith.
Why was that not?
It was close.
We totally did. I thought, the last time he got back to me right away, he did this time too, but we just had to tweak it. So anyways, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay,
Yeah.
right on. Commissioners, any questions, any items for the applicant? Mike, I want to thank you and John both. I think it was a really good conversation last time. So I think I speak for all of us. We appreciate you guys kind of being down for the conversation, and it's an interesting moment where a non-alignment is actually a good fit. So yeah, again, thanks for working through that with us. So with that, I think since this was a continuous, we need to open and close public meeting as well. So at this point, I'm going to open the public for anyone. Again, if you're here not for the Clay Center, but for Barber Drive and you have comments, this is your moment. Again, all right, so with that, I will open for a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Jeff on 1.
Second.
Jared on 2. Okay, public comment is closed. With that, commissioner comments.
I mean, I'm pretty far outside the project, but I really appreciated the amount of, or the variety of options that were presented to us. I think that helped with a really difficult puzzle. And yeah, Jared, your summary and your presentation of how this was all laid out, I think that was great. So good job to everybody on that. It's very clear.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I'm giving you each the eyeball opportunity.
Okay, motion to approve resolution number 2 of 2025.
First to Jared. Second to Nick. There we go. Cut and dry.
Thanks.
Vote. Oh yeah, thanks. Moving too fast for my own good. Commissioner vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Unanimous. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, staff.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike.
Real party.
And onward to the main event. Carbondale Clay Center.
Yeah, so you guys have seen this one before, but just as a little recap, this is their formal review this time. And let's see. So it's a new build for the Carbondale Clay Center on the existing lot, 100 block of Main Street on the east side of town at the end. It's in the HCC zone district. This is a application for minor site plan review, but we've added an alternative compliance after we reviewed the application. So we'll get to that later. Since it's in the HCC, the Historic Preservation Commission had to review the project, which they did last Thursday. There were some debates on whether it fit the Carbondale style on the materiality of the building, and if it was setting a precedent on the 100 block of Main with the marble distillery building across the street. Overall, they found and agreed that while it lacks a certain historic feel that the rest of the HCC has, that it adequately interpreted the HCC design guidelines and meets its intent. The current building is not a structure of merit and has no historical significance. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now onto the fun stuff. For the comp plan, it generally complies. It's in the downtown land use designation, the future land use map. And it fits with all of the character elements that are mentioned. As for the HCC zone district that it's in now, an instructional arts studio is an allowed use. One thing you all should discuss is whether it meets the purpose statement of the HCC. The first statement is, or the first sentence of this purpose statement is, the purpose is to preserve the original commercial character of Carbondale as a unique commercial area with a historic character. For building and lot standards, it meets everything. There's no impervious lot coverage requirements for the HCC, so they could build the entirety of the lot if they wanted, but they're proposing 18% landscaped area, which is in between the building and the sidewalk, and a small pocket park in the back of the lot as well. For building height, the maximum permitted height in the HCC is 35 feet, and their proposed max height is 34 feet, 1 inch at its tallest. For setbacks, again, there's no setback requirements, but they're proposing a little setback in the front of about 1 foot, 7 feet on the east side, 21 feet on the west side, and about 2 feet in the rear. The lot directly west of the subject property is commercial transitional, but it's being used as a residential space, which we'll get to later. Again, there's no landscape requirements, but they are proposing around 5 to 8 feet of landscaped area between the sidewalk and the building, and the pocket park in the rear. There's currently a dirt parking lot on site, and they're going to formalize that using the existing curb cut that's there now. There's no required parking in the HCC, but they're proposing 3 parking spaces, one of which will be ADA accessible. And staff supports this because it will make clay delivery easier and have less big trucks parking on Main Street. For pedestrian circulation, it's pedestrian oriented along Main Street, and is maintaining a current gravel connection to the Rio Grande and adding a second one off the pocket park. An ADA accessible sidewalk extension will extend to the front doors. And they're also proposing 2 new bike parking areas along Main Street and the Rio Grande Trail. All right, now for the fun stuff. So there are site and building design standards. Most of them generally apply, but there are 4 that I'd like you all to discuss and see if you, just debate and see if you feel if they meet the intents. The first one is large unbroken expanses and long continuous roof lines shall be avoided. The second is all building facades facing public streets shall be designed in a similar level of design detail. The third, the architectural character of new buildings or additions shall complement the architectural character of adjacent existing buildings. And the fourth is that a cornice is required. And that it shall be compatible with the historical character of the downtown. The Historic Preservation Commission did review the cornice design. I think we got one comment on it and a couple agreements that they wanted it to be a bit thicker. But other than that, those are the four. This section also references transitions between different land uses, which is a different section of the UDC. But this gets into that residential property that's right next door that's zoned as commercial transitional. There are standards that say that if a commercial use is next to a residential zoned lot, that they have to have a 5-foot setback. But since it's not zoned residential, it's just a residential use, there are different standards. And the UDC outlines that that there has to be transitions between height differences in buildings. And since the residential building is 1 story, it has to satisfy at least 3 of the requirements in the UDC at 4 to comply. They're all written in your staff report, but basically it's stepping down the building height along the shared property line along a minimum of 50% of the building length. So it's about 100 feet on that side. And there's 2 spots that are 1 story that step down. One is about 23 feet across and the other is about 16. So it doesn't quite meet the 50% rule. Let's see. The second one is increasing the side yard setback a minimum of 10 feet beyond that which is required. And they are proposing 21 feet setback. This regulation also says, and providing a landscape buffer along the shared property line, which they do not propose because it will be concrete or asphalt for the parking lot. The third one is providing variations in the side building wall and roof form so that new structures have comparable scale. That's up for debate among yourselves. And then utilizing dormers and sloping roofs to accommodate upper stories. So we recommend that you could discuss whether or not you agree with the findings for alternative compliance, which I think is attachment D, E, F, attachment F. That will grant them an alternative compliance to these, to this transition between height differences requirements. Let's see. Signage and exterior lighting will be done with separate permits. There's no solar access restrictions for this property because of the solar access zone it's in, but they did provide a solar study on page 26 of their application if you want to see how it will affect surrounding properties, if you're curious. There are several public improvements proposed, new driveway approach, sidewalk concrete landscaping, and new Main Street curb and gutter. There's an engineering report that was reviewed by the Public Works Director and no comments were provided from him. Yeah, that's all I have. You guys have any questions?
Thank you, Alex. Commissioner questions for staff, and that was a lot. So we're gonna come back to you for some guidance through this. I'm actually a little diligent on
I have a question for staff.
yeah, thanks.
Jared,
Please.
can you remind me how did we rezone this property in the package that was around the daycare? When there was a bunch of people on that block rezoning to HCC? Maybe Gavin will remember.
Yeah, that was that 2022 rezoning.
can touch base on that. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
it's-
address it.
but yes, that was all part of the same
Okay.
rezoning.
Thanks, guys.
commissioner questions for staff before we? Yeah. All right, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much for having us. Thanks for the presentation, Ellie. My name is Gavin Brook. I'm here as Two Forks Ventures representing the Carbondale Clay Center. I'm going to spend a few minutes introducing the people I'm with, not everybody in the audience, but at least a few of them as well. I'm here with Mark Chain as our planner. I think you all know him. Todd Kennedy and Will Young with CCY. Katie Bauer is also in the audience with CCY. Towards the end of this, we'd like to invite up the founder of the Carbondale Clay Center, Diane Kenny, to say a few words before public comment. We're also joined by much of the board. I see the board president and past board president in the audience and a couple of other members. Angela Bruno, the executive director, Matt Eames, and dozens of others. So thank you for coming. Tonight, Mark will give a quick planning history, project intro, some context to our application. Todd will walk us through the architectural presentation, emphasizing areas that we addressed during our courtesy hearing, during the HPC hearing, and some of the responses that we have to those comments. The Carbondale Clay Center, we hope, is an easy approval. It's the poster child of an applicant. It's aligned with the comp plan and with all the downtown uses. It has a 27-year history in the community as a nonprofit community arts organization. And it is the backbone, or one of the backbones, of the culture of Carbondale. It serves hundreds of town residents every year and thousands over its lifetime. It is a clay center of regional and national importance, and the Clay Center draws resident artists from around the nation. Some of those settle and stay and become backbone of our community. Stephen Colby's out in the audience and a number of others. And it's been enriching the cultural fabric of Carbondale for decades. Others disperse to other areas and take our Carbondale vibe to communities around the country. We're here tonight presenting for the future of a homegrown Carbondale cultural institution. As such an important part of the community, it's garnered years of support and countless hours of work have brought us here tonight. As an arts institution, it is important that we support artistic expression. And as Mark Mahoney said during our HPC hearing, it is fitting that an arts institution design a building that represents a fresh interpretation of the design guidelines. I hope you bear that in mind as we go through our presentations tonight. Mark?
Okay. Thank you, Gavin. This year, okay. Who's commanding? Are you, Todd? Okay. Well, this is the site right here, and just so you know, this was part of the original town site. There is no alley. You'll see, matter of fact, there's not even a north portion of Block 1 because that's where the railroad came in, and that did have some, I guess, unintended consequences. No alley. It'd be great to have an alley. Relatively large lot, 12,504 square feet. Could you go to the next slide, please? And there were uses in the past. You know, we think it was a lumber yard or storage for the old Dinkle General Store and the Dinkle building itself at 4th and Main. The present building, it's about 2,000 square feet, you know, masonry block. As Diane Kenny will tell you, there's no insulation or anything. It was meticulously kept up in terms of the landscaping, which was mostly grass at that time. And next sheet. Okay, 27 years is probably almost 30 years ago. Diane came in and said she had an idea for a clay, you know, she wasn't calling it the Clay Center at that time, but hey, a local pottery area. And she took me out there, and then I think also Bentley Henderson, who was the building official that time. And I thought it was interesting. It was going to be a tough site to make useful in terms of the building. But you have a lot of people who were creative with that. There was success with the Clay Center. It's grown. And I'm actually thrilled that now they are actually talking about expansion. And the expansion goes back, I know they were actually planning for it in 2001. And in terms of the Clay Center itself, there was a request for rezoning for this property and 76 South 2nd Street, which is at the northwest corner where you see it's HCC. And that is Steve's house. That's the old Ambiance Inn, which was a bed and breakfast. And these, at that time, when the rezoning came through, there were initial concepts for the development, and those were done by Ramsey, Fulton, and Building Seed. The zoning history, it's always interesting zoning here, but in 1973, this was zoned. It was called C1, and that was half of 133 was zoned for that. It had parking requirements. The concern was, hey, someday in the far future, there may be parking problems in downtown, so they did not want to zone that last block, which had no historic buildings. It did have an historic house, but it was basically a bunch of houses, and some of them in decent shape, some of them run down. So they had parking requirements. We redid the zoning code in its entirety in 1993, and it retained the commercial transitional zoning once again for parking. Up there on that, I have 2014 UDC that things were rezoned, but it was commercial transitional. The commercial transitional was actually for that entire block. And that was much to my chagrin that it's 2016, not 2014. Because between 1993 and 2016, whenever anyone came in to develop it, it was just problematic. It wasn't going to look like downtown. Some people were talking about parking under buildings like you'd seen in Colorado Springs or whatever. But it was not, that block was not taken care of in 2016. In 2017, the south side of the block wasn't rezoned in its entirety to HCC. And I think it was probably to have a good building site for the distillery. But nothing happened on the north. And when I was approached by the Clay Center to help with rezoning, I went to Janet and said, hey, isn't it time that whole block, the northern part also be rezoned? And I just think staff was busy and they said they'd like the individual property owners to undertake it. With Claire Green, a board member, I think she's still a board member. I'm not sure if she's here tonight.
She is.
Hi, Claire. We met with all the people on the north side of the block on individual meetings. And Steve is the only one who wanted to rezone at that time. When the rezoning action came in 2022, Buck Dean, the elder dean, there's two deans we deal with, Buck and Had, came in and said he wanted to be rezoned also, but it wasn't noticed, and that was going to be done in the future. So finally, for that block, 2023, 111 Main Street was annexed and zoned HCC. And we just think the entire block will one day, probably pretty soon, be rezoned HCC.
Can I just address something particularly for Jeff in his question? So the Marble Distillery came in the very first time under CT. And we didn't like the idea of the way that they wanted to deal with parking and the way they were being forced to deal with setbacks. And so P&Z actually suggested the rezoning, and HCC became Marble Distillery became the applicant for the HCC rezoning of that side at the town's suggestion. And we worked hard to solve that. That's why the south got addressed first was actually for
Yeah.
Marble Distillery.
And one other interesting twist, there were code amendments between 1993 and 2005. And they were different on each side of the 100 block of Main Street to help mitigate some of the parking requirements. Next slide, please. In terms of community outreach, that's when the community outreach really started in 2021. We had individual meetings, as I said before, with everybody in the north side. Come back one. No, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong sheet here. The Planning Commission considered the rezoning in April of 2022 and the board in July of 2022. And then there was also community outreach and public meetings with the new building design. And Building C went out of the picture. But in terms of public meetings, we've met with 111 East Main Street. As a matter of fact, one of the principals is, the landscape architect for this project. There was an HPC courtesy review in June of last year. There was an open house on the first Friday. I believe it was the first one in June. There was a planning and zoning meeting courtesy review in August 8th of that year. Since then, we've had outreach and discussions I've had them with the distillery and the preschool. We don't need to contact 111 Main. I have tried to contact the dean a few different times and we keep missing each other's call. Last but not least, there was an HPC meeting last week and you have the minutes. And this is the Planning Commission review for the site plan review tonight. And you are the final decision-making body unless there is an appeal of the entire decision or an individual condition. There's project site data, which I just have there in case, you want to discuss it, we can refer to that. I don't need to go through it at this time. I guess the only interesting thing really is that 82% of the lot is covered with impervious surface, and that includes the delivery area and the parking along the west. And with that, I will hand it over to Todd to go into the design and details of code.
Thanks, Mark.
Evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. I am Todd Kennedy. I'm a partner of CCY Architects. I've been a resident of Carbondale for 22 years, a resident of the Roaring Fork Valley for 25. Like many of the people in this room, and maybe some of you, the Clay Center is a beloved facility to my family, used by both my wife and my kid over the years. And we're here to really help push the idea that the Clay Center is going to be an institution in Carbondale for the next 100 years. I think the design challenge that we had put in front of us is one that every architect would like to take on. And it's finding that combination of capturing the spirit of Carbondale, the history of Main Street, but the artfulness and funkiness of what the Clay Center brings to Main Street. And so constantly through this design process, we were working to strike that balance between connect to history, embrace the spirit of the Carbondale Clay Center, the funkiness that brings, the artfulness that brings, and the creativity that brings to our community. So starting, we want to look at just the overall site plan, talk about some of the key issues here in terms of site planning. First, the biggest move we wanted to make was to lose the front yard space of the Carbondale Clay Center and pull that building to the front of the lot, so that in terms of the context of the rest of Main Street, there was a building that met the back edge of the sidewalk, much like the vast majority of Maine. Additionally, we understood the opportunity that our proximity to the Rio Grande Trail created. So we were also very interested in thinking about how we maintain connection between Main Street and the Rio Grande Trail, and did that really in two ways. One, through preserving the drive lane and access to parking. The other through the small setback on our east side, creating a secondary connection to Rio Grande. The parking was really about a couple of things. One, it was about getting congestion off of Main Street. So when Clay Center members are moving projects from their studio at home to the Clay Center, that there's a place for them to pull in, not occupy streets on Main Street, and reduce the congestion on Main. Additionally, we felt creating an accessible facility with a full ADA parking spot was an important value for us as the architects and for the Carbondale Clay Center as an organization. Additionally, with the loss of the front yard, as everybody knows, the Carbondale Clay Center hosts many outdoor events. We wanted this parking zone, this drive aisle to serve as a de facto outdoor venue for their continued on-site events to be both inside and outside. As we move to the upper level, maybe the most important thing to talk about here is that we felt it was really important to create engagement with the street. We're doing that, actually, to back up, through a number of different ways in terms of program on the street. The three primary spaces facing Main Street are our gallery, the lobby/entrance, and the maker space. So bringing those spaces forward to the front of the property to create pedestrian engagement. Then as we move back upstairs, we also looked at creating a roof terrace so that there can be an extension of that energy and activity, so that at First Fridays, at Potato Days, at Dandelion Days, we can work to actively pull the energy that's so prevalent at 4th and Main further to the east on Main Street in Carbondale. As we take our first look at the building, this again really speaks to how we wanted to think about engaging the pedestrian on Main Street, walking east or west. So we anchored the corner of the building with our gallery space, a one-story element at about 17 feet high, very much in scale with the one-story buildings that exist further to the west on Main Street in terms of their height and mass. Additionally, we wanted to use this one-story element at this western corner to step down to the residential use to our west. As we move to the east of our building, you'll see that we step up 2 stories and have a recessed storefront that allows for a real sense of entry and arrival to the facility.
And I'm sure everybody's noticed, but we have a model that you are welcome to come visit, and material samples as well. As we move forward to this view, we want to start talking about more of the response to the historic context. Again, I think the one-story narrow element of the gallery does a lot of work for us here. Additionally, the 2-story element is very much in scale with the 2-story Dingle building at the corner of 4th and Main. There's a response to the historic quality of Main Street through the use of proportion, scale, and mass. That connection doesn't need to be through trying to exactly emulate what the historic buildings of Carbondale are doing through imitating brick detailing or specific corbelled cornices. We're trying to reinterpret this and look at a progressive forward-looking approach that again is artful, connects with that spirit of the Clay Center, but squinting your eyes feels like this building fits in, but the materiality is taken a step further and done in a way that is artful, unexpected, but again connects with the values of the Clay Center. Connecting with the values of the Clay Center, transitioning to sustainability, also a value of ours, also a value of the town of Carbondale. What's driving a lot of the form of the highest portion of this building is bringing incredible daylighting into the makerspace through north-facing light monitors, which then have their roof surface tilt back to the south to create an opportunity for optimized PV for solar. Will, I can't remember our total PV array on the roof, but Roughly 50 kW.
So 50 kW of PV. Additionally, on the sustainability front, the mechanical systems for this building will be all electric air source heat pump. So 3 to 3.5 times more efficient than more conventional systems. The other thing we're doing from a sustainability point of view is to think about the resilience of this building, which begins to think about the materiality of the building. Now, even in urban conditions, which downtown Carbondale is an urban condition, wildfires become a real concern, as we've all seen. So every material on the exterior of this building is non-combustible. We're using a combination of corrugated fiber cement, which is the material you see here. We're using a combination of bent folded metal, and we're using clay or ceramic gabion. Gabion, for those of you that don't know, is the metal cages that are often filled with river rock. In this case, rather than filling those with river rock, we're filling it with glazed and fired ceramics. Again, creating this artful moment on the outside of the building, particularly on the gallery, where inside this element is the expression of finished works that artists and members of the Carbondale Clay Center are displaying. Outside is this collection of remnants and pieces that people will donate to the Carbondale Clay Center to have their ceramic art be a part of the Clay Center in perpetuity. As we move to the elevations, just walking around the materiality of the building for a minute. So the primary material, again, driven mostly by cost, is this corrugated fiber cement. So the light gray material you see on most of these elevations is that corrugated fiber cement. While we're here, I want to take a moment to speak to building height, because the building was presented as 34 feet tall. From the front elevation along Main Street and from what's visible along Main Street, the height of the building is 28 feet tall to this corner. It's not until you get 40 feet deep into the property that we hit the high point of the building at 34 feet. This point from our renderings on Main Street, just backtracking here for a minute, are not visible. So fundamentally, the building reads as 28 feet tall from the perspective of a person walking up or down Main Street. So these are the front and the east elevation. The orange material is bent, folded corten siding, and we'll speak a little bit more to that as we move forward. And then we've got the west elevation and the Rio Grande elevation. On the west elevation, we anticipated, obviously we were creating a 21-foot offset. So on this elevation, we created much more animation to this side with this extra corten element, these exterior staircases, the exterior porches, and there's a lot of depth and play across this facade, because obviously our drive aisle is not going to get developed in the future. The neighboring lot to the west likely will be, but this side of the building will still be very experienced. As we talk to the east side of the east side of the building is articulated like many of the buildings on Main Street, where there's a very articulated front facade, and then you move to the sides of the building and it's fairly utilitarian. We've still worked to compose this elevation, because it is visible from the Catherine Store stop sign, by the use of what we call the sawtooth roofs, the corten siding from the front elevation of the building wrapping around the corner, as well as the deck that you see on the second level, giving the upper level studios some access to some outdoor space. As we move to this view, again, this is looking down Main Street, obviously, and you can look towards 4th and Main here and just get a sense of the scale of the buildings that exist on 4th and Main, and the line of our roof edge and how that begins to translate to the heights of the building that exist further west on Main. I'm going to backtrack again because I want to spend some time talking about our corten metal. We were really interested in connecting with the idea of brick detailing and brick facades, but doing that again in a unique and artful way. It's a little difficult to see in this rendering, but you can see that the use of this material on the front facade isn't consistent. You can see a variety of textures on this material. And one of the things that is beautiful about brick buildings is that they have this way of casting shadow and creating texture through the use of turning the module of the brick and creating sawtooth courses or entablatures or whatever it might be. So we wanted to come up with the modern interpretation of brick detailing that would create a dynamic facade that allowed the sun to play and animate this facade in the same way that the sun animates the more traditional buildings of Carbondale Main Street. Couple last views. This is just really a view to speak to, I think, really the unique and incredible site that we have in terms of its relationship to Main Street, its relationship to the Rio Grande Trail. We think there's a real opportunity to think about engagement, not only on the Main Street side, but creating engagement on the Rio Grande side of this property. We're doing that through the kiln shed anchoring this side of the property, and that kiln shed will have operable panels that can open and close, so that if Matt is in there firing in the middle of winter, or I guess there's not going to be as many people on the Rio Grande Trail in winter, but in the middle of summer, those doors are open. Somebody can be riding by, walk up, there'll be a barrier so they can't walk into the kiln shed, but they can pop in, see what's happening, see what kind of projects are taking place. not really in planning and zoning purview, but we wanted to show you a couple interior views just so you see the whole package. This is the interior. The interiors are seen as very utilitarian. But again, in this view, you can really get a sense for the quality of natural daylight that's filling this makerspace due to those north-facing clear. One additional view. At this point, we wanted to move back through the elevation of a few of the elevations, floor plans, and just talk a little more carefully about some of the things in the report. On this sheet, we primarily wanted to focus again on that question of building height. And you can see in both of these views that we've added some dimension strings here to help you guys understand where the 34-foot height of our building occurs. And again, happening at almost 45 feet back from the front property line, with our leading edge on Main Street being at 28 feet. I just got bumped off of our internet, sorry. As we move to this page back to the floor plan, wanted to talk a little bit about setbacks and again, how we're creating pedestrian engagement as well as pedestrian connection between Main Street and Rio Grande. So again, you can see on the east side of the property, this gravel pathway that connects to the Rio Grande, and then the drive aisle that creates pedestrian activity back to our pocket park. Underneath our pocket park is also our dry well, our infiltration basin, so that all of our stormwater management for this project occurs on site. We wanted to share these details to speak to the nature of detail in this building and the effort we're making to again create texture and shadow, because ultimately detail is really about how sun plays across the facade. So wanted to share with you the detail that we're using at some of our windows that is very much in keeping with the idea of a trim, but doing it in a much thinner profile, but still creates that sense of depth as though these windows are set within a very deep wall because of the shadow that's created. Here's a detail of some of that bent metal siding. So again, you can begin to understand the depth and texture that exists across this facade to get that play of light. These next two views really speak to our cornice details. The cornice at the gabion is here. The cornice at the top of our 28-foot element, the Corten element is shown here. And again, really, it's not so much about the thinness or the thickness of these or how far they project. It's really about what's shown in gray here. And that's the shadow that these elements are creating that bring the materials underneath them to life. And with that, we're going to have Diane come up and share a few words.
As Diane's making her way to the podium, I just want to summarize. We're asking P&Z for three things tonight. We're asking that P&Z determine that the response to the HPC guidelines and the UDC building guidelines are appropriate for this building on this block of Main Street. We're asking that P&Z determine that the existing non-conforming residential use on the CT zone district, on the island of CT zone district, is not a restriction that should determine the future of the building on our lot. As a backup, we're asking that the P&Z determine that alternative compliance is adequate. And finally, we're asking that P&Z follow the staff recommendation and approve resolution 3 of 2025 in support of the minor site plan application on behalf of the Carbondale Clay Center. Please.
Wow, that's a lot. So thank you guys. I mean, what an honor. 28 years ago, the Clay Center was just an idea floating around in the valley in Carbondale. And by the way, I love Carbondale. And I hope and I think the Clay Center reflects that. And I love this town. The first time I set foot in it was a dirt street in 1972. But in 84, I moved here full time with my husband. So 28 years floating around is a big idea. It's not totally original. There are other clay centers around the country in towns like Philadelphia and Baltimore. So I knew Carbondale could be right up there with them. It's a big idea in a small town, but Carbondale, as we know, has a big heart. And the reason I thought it would work here, and it did, is because it was such fertile ground for creativity. We already had KD&K, we had the Valley Journal, we had CCAH, and things were blooming or starting to, or building on what went before. So how did it happen? It was a confluence of grassroots people, of grassroots community organizing, and people coming together who shared core values of community and love for the arts, not just observing, but making. Participatory art, there's power in that. And it also had to do with grace and hard work and volunteers and generosity. One of the most generous people in the beginning is Tim McFlynn, who's here tonight. He did our 501c3 and met with Michelle Cardamone and me up to help us get this thing legal and do it the right way. And we're eternally grateful for Tim. Another person outstanding for generosity in the very, very early part was Mike Stranahan. And if it weren't for Mike, coming together with Mike, who provided the money basically to buy that property. And I remember in the beginning, it was a very heady time, a very heady few years of talk and ideas and excitement. And can this happen or not? Mark Chain had to be there with the zoning because the property line it was wonky. And so we had a showdown with Bob Noon and Tim McFlynn. And it was kind of funny because we're all friends. And they traded corners of the property to make the lot work for us. Mike and I hiked up Red Hill, talking and brainstorming. And I remember sitting there at the top with Mike Stranahan, and we agreed that this was a total act of faith. And Mike said, well, let's jump off the cliff together. If you jump off, I'll hold your hand. And we jumped off together because we didn't know for sure it would work. Over the years, in the early years, I used to write in our newsletter about golden moments at the Clay Center where something would just be just so heartwarming and wonderful. Like Heiko, a retired water engineer who worked for the World Bank, and he lived in Eagle. He drove over every day. And I remember him just walking out of the office and seeing him talking to one of the kids from the YRC program. And they're looking at a piece of professional art in the gallery and deciding, does it work? Does it not? I don't like this. I do like that. And it just warmed my heart. And others, I remember driving home from all day there down Main Street. And honestly, I would say out loud, I love this town. And I do, and I still do. And now my golden moment is driving by still, sometimes at night, if coming home late from something, and the lights are on. There's almost always somebody in there working. And that was part of the scheme from the beginning to make it a 24/7 access studio, because that's what artists need. Not everyone can fit it into a schedule time. So I also have to say that some of those early Clay Centers that inspired me, the Clay Center now, 28 years this year later, it's as recognized and established. It's one of the main Clay Centers. I brag a little bit, but Carbondale needs to be in the title, because it's only in Carbondale, I think. And in fact, case in point, right now, Matt, the manager there, and several of the staff, they've been working on mounting a show at a national clay conference that happens every year at different cities around the country. This year it's in Salt Lake City, and they had the idea to invite past residents and current residents and artists who've done workshops there and people who have made it happen over the years. They have close to 40 pieces, 40 invited artists for this show that they're going to be, the two Matts, Matt Johnson and Matt Eames, are going to be driving to Salt Lake City to set it up. And it's quite prestigious on the National Ceramic Arts level. So I'm really proud of them. And so lastly, I'll say, why do I support this? I am excited about this. It's not quite as funky as as some of the things we've seen there. And they promise not to make it too pretty. The main word I can think about is trust. I totally trust this crew, these guys, the staff, the board, and these are the people who've made it happen still, who've carried it forward almost 30 years now. And I know that it will be as economical as possible, which is really hard given how expensive everything is. I know it'll be artistic. I know it will be sustainable, and I know it will be beautiful, as you could see. So I guess I'm not afraid to beg and say, please let it go forward, because it's been like 4 years and we really need to do this. So that's what I have to say. So.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Thank
Here
you.
to answer any of your questions.
And with that, commissioners, questions for applicants at this time? There was a few things said over the last few minutes. We're gonna do our best to contain and retain. But Todd, nothing else. Thank you for an excellent presentation. And there's a lot going on here. Really appreciate the articulate and well-organized walkthrough. Questions for applicant, commissioners?
Yeah, great presentation, by the way, guys. My main question, and I think you addressed this, but I just may not remember it properly here, but we don't see a lot of metal, all metal buildings in Carbondale. I see we see, accents here and there. Was there a deliberate choice to not go with brick as it's on Main Street, and that's the primary material that we see on Main Street? What was the
Primarily,
options for why we didn't go for that?
thinking about Carbondale's status as a nonprofit and the cost of building brick relative to metal is quite expensive. So again, we wanted to look at a material that we could, that in some ways might be seen as fairly ordinary, and how do we make it extraordinary? And to be clear, this is not the corrugated metal that you see on the buildings at the roundabout. This is, I'm going to say the word custom, which is going to question whether it's less expensive than brick, but it is. It's bent at particular profiles to create that variety of texture, to again embody the spirit of texture, shadow, and it is not going to be the metal that you see used at the roundabouts.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, you took the characteristics of the material, not the characteristics of the buildings, right?
Correct. Yeah. So
Great.
again, this idea of the way sun moves from east to west on Main Street, and it articulates in the brick detailing at 4th and Main on the Dinkle building, the dynamic quality of this building. Let me get back one more view here.
This is a playground for light, for sure.
To use, again, ignore the color of this image because ours is rusted metal, so it'll be sort of deep purple to orange. But this was an image that we found that spoke to the way that we wanted to use metal. So again, in terms of the variety of texture that's occurring here, and again, the way that light will play across that in the same way that light plays across the surface of brick.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions for the applicant before we open it up to public comment?
If I may.
Yes, please.
Todd, just a quick question on the roof with that sawtooth. How does the drainage work for snow
Yeah, so you can see that we have these deep wells here. So there'll be heat tape and then these drain to downspouts, which will also be heat taped. Let me get to, oops, going the wrong way, sorry. So they lead to these, what are called charger boxes, which collect the water and then come down these downspouts. So how that's addressed.
Gavin, was the HPC meeting March 6th? You guys rescinded the signage idea? It was in the packet, but it's not.
We were asked by staff to defer that to a separate application and a separate hearing.
Okay. Is it still the prevailing idea? What the one render image that we saw on the east side of the building?
Generally, yes. And I think one of the things we're trying to do with that, again, we have some images we could show, but again, we were asked by staff to not address this here, is that signage is somewhere between signage and mural. And again, how we're able to represent that on the computer in our three-dimensional models is rather challenging, as you might imagine. But the idea that we would play with, so that signage is painted on a surface that's doing this, the sort of wavy cement board that you see over there, and thinking about just applying the paint to, let's say, the left side of that. So is you see it straight on, it feels more abstract. It doesn't feel like a sign. It's just as you drive by or walk by in that one moment, you see everything align, and it's at Carbondale Play Center for a moment and then begins to fade and disappear. So Jared, sorry to
I was.
My fault.
Yeah.
And then there was one other comment in that HPC meeting about more Dabian wall that might be a possibility, and I just didn't understand where that would happen on the building, or is that an idea that you guys were not
So
interested in?
it's an
presenting?
idea that got floated, and I think one of the reasons that HPC was interested in the Gabion wall was some of the poetics of the relationship of that to the brick, right? The composition of something at that unit size to the brick. They were contemplating some idea of suggesting that it comes underneath the metal bar or the upper story in those areas between the storefront glazing.
Okay, so it's Main Street facing is what they were suggesting.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thanks.
Ann, did you have your hand up?
I just needed some info on how it's accessed from the bike path. Is it like parking lot side that it's accessed through the parking or the little pocket park, or is it?
Yeah, I mean,
Just
yeah.
wondered what the pedestrian flow is for that, because I appreciate that you put a park in there. But I saw stairs coming on the park, and I was concerned about ADA access, you know,
Right.
from that part of the building, if it's meant to be one of the access points. But I know that it's difficult to put a slope in that small of a space, but.
So there's actually not stairs at the gravel path to the east side of the building, where it makes the connection with the Rio Grande. Currently, there are stairs at the west side into the pocket park directly. Yep. At the current arrangement, there is actually a lease agreement or a reciprocal agreement with RAFTA to allow bike parking in the RAFTA right of way that serves this building. And so that's what we've agreed to continue with. I think we could take the question of whether there's a way to develop a slope there rather than stairs. But I think the intention is to continue with the existing.
A cool thing to have if
Yep.
if it's possible. I know that's not part of, you know, us approving or disapproving it, but I just, you know, saw a couple steps and I was like, oh,
Yep.
you know, that everybody should get to have that entrance,
Yeah,
if it's
right. We
possible.
don't,
Okay.
it's about a 16-inch grade change, so I don't think we could get a true ADA ramp without some agreement with RAFTA to slope into their grade into their right of way. But we may be able to get a non-ADA ramp, a non-rated ramp.
I would hate to have part of our population miss out on, you know, being able to enter from a really cool space. That's all.
So would we. It's a great point. I'm good. Thank you.
Mhm. Good, good. Thank you for that. With that, open the lectern for public comment. Okay, do we have anybody online? Just trying to keep tabs on that. Let me see if
That's two of us.
it's the two of you guys. Yeah. A lot more smile in that picture there, Todd, but I see a resemblance. All right. So if there we go. Okay.
If anybody online would like to speak, you can raise your hand and we can get you.
I recognize both those attendees, they're for more support.
And as a gentle reminder, absolutely come up and share your words, your thoughts. Please be respectful of time. We do have a large group tonight, so 3 minutes.
I'll go first and I'll be brief. Because
Oh,
I
yeah,
know most.
and your
Oh.
name and address before you begin.
Oh, my
please.
name and address. I'm Angela Bruno. I'm the executive director of the Clay Center. 150 Oak Lane, or the Clay Center's
No,
address?
you're right, you're
Yeah,
right.
150 Oak Lane in Glenwood Springs. I know everyone, thank you all for being here. This is so amazing. I know everyone is probably sick of me talking about this building, but first of all, I love everything about this team. I love everything about the building, the design. But for me personally, it is much less about what it actually looks like and more about what goes on inside the walls and what will go on inside the walls of this new building. As I stand here, our current facility is failing. The roof over the main building, which has sheltered thousands of hours of artistry and connectivity, is collapsing. It'll probably last another year, maybe. So we need this. We really need this. We owe it to the community to invest in a sustainable, inclusive, ADA compliant facility where everyone is welcome and everyone is equal. That's all I have to say.
Thank you all. Well, nice to see you. My name is Paul Mirsky. I'm president of the board and I live at 234 Blue Creek Trail. I moved to Carbondale 3 years ago, and when I did, my girlfriend, trying to trap me into doing what I hadn't done for 35 years, got me lessons, a series of 4 lessons. One of them was Stephen Colby, actually. And during one of those lessons, after I'd been there a couple of times, Sandy Gardner, the longtime heart of the Clay Center, looked over at me and she said, "You belong here." And I was really struck at how welcoming. And so those lessons led to classes. Those classes led to a board seat. The board seat that led to the presidency. And since I share my loves and my enthusiasms, as everyone knows, I'm often talking about the Clay Center when I move around the community. Really, from Up Valley on the chairlift all the way to the doctor's office in Carbondale, everybody knows the Clay Center. And not only do they know the Clay Center, but the smile comes out immediately and they're enthusiastic. And they say things like, "My kids love that place. My grandkids love that place." And occasionally and more frequently, they say, "I want to take a class there, but the classes are always full." And those comments ranged to the sort of even more moving. And this happened recently. Someone knocked on my door while I was in the doctor's office. She had been at the front and had recognized me from the Clay Center. And after telling me how much she loved Stephen Colby's class, she said, "You know, you guys really got me through a hard time in my life." And the community is not just local as well. I recently heard from the curator at a museum in the Midwest who had been sent from, I don't know who, a picture of our marvelous artist, Molly Altman's new work, and she wanted to hear more. We use the phrase "keep Carbondale dirty," and CCC is dynamic and it's gritty, and yes, it is dirty. But we do that by putting art and craftsmanship and beauty and learning and failure and growth and doing all of it together right at the heart of this marvelous community. So we thank you for your consideration and we look forward to moving into our new home.
Thank you all. I'll be brief. But my name is Claire Green. I live at 3311 Hager Lane. But I lived in Carbondale for 30 years before we moved to Glenwood. I just want to address how impressed I am with the work that's been done by CCY Gavin and Mark, they really spent a lot of time and energy making sure that this project met the character of Carbondale. And I think it's, well, it is a beautiful building and a lot of thought has gone into that. Thank you.
Howdy, folks. I'm standing up for Laura Stover and myself. She's skinning under the moon, but I'm Sean Tanazi. I live up on Missouri Heights. You need my address, 1030 County Road 113.
Thanks.
And I wanted to use your time quickly because the two of us saw a town say yes to a new Center for the Arts. And I was lucky enough to have a shelf in the Clay Center in that building that was constructed. So I want to tell you about it, but I was wondering if anyone was going to do the mustard seed thing, but it's pretty true of the Clay Center because so much blossoms from it. There's the activities for people of all ages in the community, and there's a lot of events all year long, really nice. My favorite place for First Friday, and obviously all the artists in the studio, and the gallery is so incredible. But it's like a mustard seed too, because it's so freaking tiny. And the amount of energy Matt and Angela have to use to transform between those things in that list, it's just too much. So I think they deserve a space like this, and it's appropriate, and the architecture is amazing. It's really neat to see, except is that for ants? No, I'm just kidding. But the thing I saw firsthand, it was definitely a big building for the town, and they went for it. It looked like it belonged in San Francisco, really, where there's wood sidewalks and cowboys. It was in Jackson. And, you know, Jackson is sort of a novelty, maybe even sort of cheesy, a vacation town. But I think when they built a new Center for the Arts, you really could see that as one of the activating points for it turning into more of a community in the Rockies. And it was a true hub. I loved being in there. So I'm excited for it to happen here in Carbondale too. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Emma Martin. I'm the Programs and Community Engagement Manager at Carbondale Clay Center. And I just wanted to say that the more we grow, the more returning students want to come back and new people who have never been. And the least, favorite part of my job is telling people, I'm sorry, we don't have space, it's full. And so the quicker we do get a bigger space, the quicker we can accommodate everybody, including space to have an accessible wheel and tables that change height so that everybody is welcome. And I'm really eager to get to that point. Thank you. Oh, and my address is 621 South 2nd Street.
Thank you, guys. Stephen Colby, 74 Went Boulevard. Been an honor to teach and live with this community for the last 24 years. And the building and Main Street, I think as an art organization, it's supposed to push the aesthetic. I also think, I'm pretty sure it's the only place that if you really want to make a brick, you can come and make it at the Clay Center. So that's really it. Great job and thank you.
Hi, my name's Andrew Roberts Gray, 76 Went Boulevard. My wife is Annette Roberts Gray. She has worked at the Clay Center almost since its beginning. We're very good friends with Diane, and probably we have more friends that are ceramic artists than any other occupation you could name. Sometimes the value of a building, the historical value, isn't how long it's existed or how it's related to the community in the past. It's prospective. The value of the building is about what it's going to do for the community in the future. I think how it's going to be used has been well said, but sometimes a building becomes iconic. Think about what New York City would be without the Guggenheim Museum. Now, the Guggenheim Museum did not fit in the neighborhood. It was new construction. It was cement across from the park. The park's fence was from the 19th century. The apartment buildings around it were from another time. And yet now, one of the ways you think about New York City is that building. That's all I have to say.
Hi, I'm Brooke Levan, and Rose and I started Sustainable Settings 96, 97, about the same time the Clay Center started, and clay and ceramics brought us to the valley and through the Anderson Ranch Art Center. And we quickly got to know Mike Stranahan and the Stranahans, and the valley's an amazing place. And I'm not saying we're a good example now, but we've got 244 acres, and now we have 10 years of scientific lab tests that show that we have healed the land, and we have upward trending soil life. That's been our project since the clay. So I don't think we never know what brings us to our life's work. But this project and this place and these people have established a place where we come to know ourselves through the arts. A powerful project, and I've watched it grow from the beginnings, and this is beautiful. And as my mother told me years ago, it's a right idea for Carbondale and for this place. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, commissioners, for being willing to hear us and hear our testimony about our love of the Carbondale Clay Center. My name is Frank McGurk. I live at 35 Horseshoe Lane, Carbondale, Colorado. My wife and I moved here from Boulder, where we had lived for 30 years. I was involved in clay all the way back then from my days in Fort Collins, where I studied ceramics at Colorado State University. But in Boulder, we had a clay facility, and I was really looking to get engaged, get involved. Over that whole 30-year period, it never happened. I had a little studio in my home, but I wanted a community to be spending time with as a clay artist. And so here I was in Boulder, which I thought was, pretty fancy and had just about everything artistic that you could want. And it just didn't happen there for me, so I can't speak for others, but it just wasn't a vibrant community there. Probably in the first month I moved to Carbondale, I didn't know there was a clay center here, but I was driving down Main Street and I saw the sign, and I didn't spend much time to find a place to park and went in and said, oh, anyway, long story short, I have for the last 20 years been involved in the Clay Center in multiple levels. I've been on the board. I've been president of the board on a couple of different occasions. I teach ceramics classes there, and it has become my center of my community here in the Roaring Fork Valley. And so I am friends with just about everybody here in the room and making new friends all the time. And so this has been just such a great experience. And I just want my comments to say, when we are able to get this new building up and going, I think all of that same spirit and energy will just be magnified. So we look forward to your support. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gabby Galverluck. I live at 2655 Dolores Way, Unit 200 in Carbondale. And I moved here about 3 years ago because I applied and I got accepted as a resident at the Clay Center. And I just want to shed some light and explain how amazing the Clay Center is and how The residency program is well known with young artists in academia and outside of academia throughout the whole country. That's how I found out about the Clay Center here. And my residency ended like a year and a half ago, and I still live here. And I call this place home, and I don't foresee myself moving anywhere else. I know there's other residents who have stayed around. Stephen Colby, he also stuck around here after his residency. And so I just want to express that the Clay Center itself is a magnet for young artists who are extremely passionate about what they do, and we get the opportunity to teach the community here. So that benefits from the residency as well. And the facilities desperately need to be updated. We mix glazes and clay, and there just needs to be like better ventilation, just straight up for, you know, longevity of everyone here. Literally. So I would love to see that with the new building. And with the residency program, we get to teach, and I've gotten the privilege of teaching a lot of the community here, and I want to continue teaching bigger classes, like our program. Emma, I don't know Emma's title, but as Emma said, the programs coordinator, I think, is her legit title. But she has to turn people down, and I think the community deserves better. The Clay Center doesn't teach just its regular 9-to-5 people who impact the community, but like of other walks of life, like survivors of domestic abuse and things like that. Like everyone here in the Roaring Fork Valley deserves to come and touch clay, no matter where you're from, how much money you make. So I want to continue seeing that part of the Clay Center grow. And thanks for your time.
Hello, my name is Matt Johnson. I live on 196 North 10th Street, 5 blocks or something. I'm currently the studio coordinator at the Clay Center, but that's a new position, and kind of the thread of my life weaves back to the inception. As a 23-year-old, I happened to be working. I was back here from university and doing a teaching internship at Colorado Rocky Mountain School. And I also was working in Diane's studio when she came in and said, I'm about to go have a meeting with Michael Stranahan about such and such. And to me, I didn't know who Michael Stranahan was, and it didn't mean much except that she was saying she wanted to start a community Clay Center. So in some sense, my life weaves back into the very beginnings. Eventually, I found myself back in the Valley, and so my life has kind of come in parallel with the Clay Center and moved away at times and come back in parallel. But it's always been a touchstone for me artistically to kind of continue the foundation of my educational experience, which was in the fine arts and ceramics specifically. And now I find myself in this role of being an employee. It's fairly recent. And even if that were to end tomorrow or next month, that wouldn't change how important the center is to me and the future of it. And I guess I would close with this anecdote of, I just finished working with a 13, 14-year-old student who's doing her 8th grade project in ceramics. And I've been working with her twice a week since October. And just to have something like the Clay Center that offers an opportunity to a young person who's starting, just a little younger than I was when I was introduced to clay at CRMS. And to see her just kind of come out of her shell and just enjoy it to the point that she has the courage to come in to Angela in the office yesterday and see if she could work there this summer. And that's looking like a likelihood of her first summer job at the Clay Center. And so I think that 13, 14, all the way to people working there, way past retirement and me as a teacher there, having the experience of teaching students in that full age range bracket. It's just a super rich experience for me. And, but I think more than that, super rich for the community in general. So I'm super excited about it, you know, regardless of what my role is in the future. Yeah, it's a super exciting thing. And I hope everyone feels that excitement. Thanks.
Greg had raised his hand, so I don't know if. Greg, if you're still with us and you want to speak, you can unmute yourself. Maybe not.
It was a moral support wave.
We'll go with that.
I have one, I was texted at 6:02 PM tonight from a neighbor of the Play Center, and I'd like to read their text because they can't be here tonight.
Which neighbor is this one?
It's the director of the CRMS preschool. I don't know the precise address of the preschool, and I don't know where Bridget lives, but this is Bridget from CRMS preschool. I will not be able to make the meeting as I came down with a cold. I support the addition to the Clay Center. If they need a vote, I will provide it. That's it. I just wanted someone from the community and a neighbor into the record. So,
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Greg, raise his hands, maybe.
Yeah. I'll let Greg. There we go.
Greg, you should be good to go, Greg.
Back.
We can hear you, Greg.
Oh, you can? Okay. Hi, how are you all doing tonight?
Good, Greg. Can you please state your full name and your address for the record, please?
My name is Greg McLean, and I live at 150 Oak Lane in Glenwood Springs, Colorado.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to speak on the materials, the look of the building. I understand I'm a contractor in the Valley. I have been for 30 years. I see a lot of different things, all keeping in the same premise. I understand that, though being in the community, I like seeing different things on occasion. I don't want to drive down Main Street and see the same brick on every building. I think being a little bit different, they were keeping with the color, keeping with the look, the shade, the light, all of the things meeting the requirements of that. I don't see why we would want everything to look the same. All the houses in the neighborhoods don't. I understand the historic preservation of Main Street, though there's already several different styles, and it just doesn't bother me. I'm not sure that it will be an issue for the community so much. So anyway, that's all I wanted to comment on.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I'm Travis McFlynn. I live at 420 Boyd, Carbondale. I'm going to echo what Greg said and what Andrew said about bricks. As potters, we know ourselves because of the shards that we find. Those brick buildings weren't originally from here. Bricks came in on a railroad, so they didn't really mirror what was here. I just thought about that when I was thinking that that was this being a new relic, you know, and I imagine that once this is built, looking forward, we wouldn't want that to be the only aesthetic that we're looking towards either. But thank you, thank all of you Good night.
Going once.
Short. Because I talked about,
Could you please go to the mic? Sorry. Just so it's on record.
the past. And now that I'm older, quite a bit, from an older person's point of view, I recently had a conversation with a woman whose husband had died, and she's probably 80 years old, like I am. And he did ceramics years ago, and she told me that around Christmas, they had discovered a box of his ceramics that had never been, it was bisqueware, and they had never fired it in glaze. And she went to the Clay Center for a private lesson at Christmas time. And I think it was one of the Matts, I think it was maybe Matt Johnson, but who worked with her and glazed these. Her whole family came for Christmas. And so they fired these pieces and shared them among her children, her adult children and their kids. And the clay, that I must say, really warmed my heart to hear that story. So anyway, I wanted to share that last perspective from the other end.
With that, I believe we can, for motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Second.
Right. We good, commissioners? Ready to do this? Out of respect for everybody's time and energy, I'm just gonna kind of, I think, try to usher us through a little bit. I'm also gonna look towards staff, Ellie, mostly you, because I know you're driving this train. And we're gonna kind of walk through the high points of the homework you've given us. From there, look to each of you as always for your knowledge and perspective on this. And again, just out of respect, we're just gonna try to keep things efficient, nice and tight, but no disrespect to your opinions. So if things are to be said, let's say them. Here we go. The first thing on my list from Ellie is, I'm just gonna read it. The purpose of the historic commercial core district is to preserve the original commercial center of Carbondale as a unique commercial area with a historic core character. Sorry. The intent is to accommodate a variety of complementary commercial, service, entertainment, and residential uses to create a market atmosphere compatible with the downtown. The district is intended to be for primarily customer-oriented commercial uses on the street level with office and residential on the upper stories. The HCC district is designed to accommodate intense development of individually owned businesses in an attractive pedestrian-oriented setting, following the design, character, and patterns of the historic downtown area. It's our first charge, commissioners. Does anybody have comments regarding this first charge, this first level of inquiry for the Clay Center?
I think it meets unique very abruptly. Like, it is definitely unique. Characteristics, I understand how they interpreted characteristics of the HCC zone. I think it's a bit of a stretch personally, but I do find that there's absolutely nobody here saying that this should not be built. So I think my personal design opinions don't matter.
Or they were scared away. But
I would be too. I've never seen it this full in here.
Not for a positive thing anyways.
Same. Not a single person.
Noted, Jared. Yeah, thank you. Any other input on this opening statement as far as the UDC historic commercial core zone district?
So, yeah, I mean, your point is noted. Maybe it's not meeting the letter of the intent of that.
I haven't made a point. I'm just reading the zone
Well,
district.
is it residential on the second floor, right? Is it exactly meeting the letter? I seem to want to turn more to the comp plan and see if it meets the spirit and intent of the comp plan, seeing as it is trying to go above and beyond, push the boundary a little bit. So does it meet what we envision for the next 20 years? And generally, I think it does.
31 of the PDF. Does any commissioner here have a, by and large, objection based on the zone district designation? Are we okay with the how the creativity is applied, given the HCC?
As far as UDC is concerned, I am not.
Great.
Yeah, I don't really have.
Let's move on. Check one. I'm gonna go on to, I'm gonna move past, unless any, I think setbacks, I think we can talk about transitions if we'd like. We have a step down on the west. As far as, is there any major objections to the step down connection on the west side of the property?
No.
Should we just consider massing in total? Is that what you're?
I'm kind of clicking through Ellie's list here, and so we'll get there, I think. I'm on page 131 PDF of the packet.
Okay, it's broken up into several packets on my end. I'm sorry.
Page 3 of. Page 3 of the staff report, 131 of the PDF.
Thank you, thank you. Just trying to follow.
I think the second grouping of comments that Elliot asked us to go through were the site and building design from the UDC 5.7. Question number 1, does this site, how does it respond to the large unbroken expanses of long and continuous roof lines that shall be avoided? Concerns, objections with this item?
Yeah, that's where my main, I mean, those are I have two concerns. It was the brick question. The second one is the east elevation. I think the sawtooth on a third story doesn't really justify the breaking up of, like, it's one continuous mass. And to me, I feel like that's where Ellie's point to us to look into review is justified. I think it's valid.
Could you bring up the east elevation, please, Todd?
Elevation or plan too.
Right, there is no third story, so it's just second story.
Well, yeah, but you're encroaching into the third story is what I'm saying, like with the roof.
So there is a forward module, there is the rear module that breaks it up, and I think we also know of what's coming on as far as our exciting new town gateway food truck element that will be the actual in front of that. But I think, so what you're saying as far as that front module doesn't provide enough, you have just like a question on that?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if we look at it from what is proposed, yeah, I think it could look okay. But my main concern is at the ground level, level 1. My old office, we had so much corrugated metal on the outside of that building. And to me, I think it gets a little much when you have such repetitive lines for such a long time right at your eye level. I don't think it's broken up properly enough, but that is, that's my opinion. As the building facade in total, yes, where humans exist, I think it's lacking.
Okay. Other comments, commissioners?
I had a similar reaction to this elevation. It's
Yeah.
like, it's big and more monotonous than the rest of the building. It was actually where I thought you might introduce more gabion wall to like
Right.
break up the space.
That's what I
But
thought
I
too.
don't have any objection to the roof line. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
a beautiful building, and I think it'll be a statement as you're entering from that east side of town. And but I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, those, I mean, that's my main concern is that I don't feel like it is meeting it strictly on level 1, right? If we look at the facade in total, I think it's well broken up if we look at it from just that one perspective. And that's where I would like the discussion to happen if there's nobody else that shares that concern.
No, I
That's
I
why we're
agree
on a
with
party.
you. I agree with both of you. Todd, would you mind going to the other perspective from the stop sign?
Yeah, from Catherine's store.
From there you go.
Yeah.
So that's what you're
Yeah.
going to experience from the street, like you're saying.
Well, that house will be gone though.
No, it's
No, it'll
No,
be there.
it'll be there.
I thought that's where we're.
they're
oh,
turning
it's-
it into a restaurant.
Yeah.
That's
It'll
right.
be like the indoor seating
I
area.
forgot.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we drive on the right side of the street here, so we'll have a slightly different angle on.
I look back there every time.
What's that? Driving on the right side of the street again. So anyways, I think we'll get more of the east elevation here. But I think to your point, this is the closest thing we have to the arrival from Catherine's store for this commission to consider.
Todd, is there any way that you can zoom in to the right side of that perspective so we're getting a little less of the street and a little more of your project?
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. I mean, at this point, I mean, now that I see it a little closer up, doesn't bother me quite as much, which is not what I was expecting.
You wanted to know. I don't, that's my only concern, and I think that's,
Is it too big? I don't think it is. I mean,
It's really cool that there's a pedestrian connection through these two lots too.
I do want to reel the comments in a little bit. Remember, with this one, we were just talking about large unbroken expanses of long continuous roof lines, and how
Right.
they should be avoided.
okay.
I don't
fair
think
enough.
What
was
my
just
eyes
roof lines.
see
I think
are,
roof lines are
is quite
included.
a broken roof line. I'm just gonna be objectively clear here,
I agree.
folks.
Yep.
It's a sawtooth.
Yeah.
No, I think it includes roof lines. It's not just roof lines. There's a comma in front of roof lines.
Yes, continuous roof line should be
So-
avoided.
That's where I'm coming from.
Okay. Is there enough to hold us up on this one, or should we, we'll
Look,
we'll
I
put a pin
posed
in,
the question.
we'll put a pin in this one?
I'm not dying on a hill for this, you know, I just wanted to see if people agreed with me.
Or on a saw
If
blade.
there's
for
no
that matter.
agreement or no comment, I think the comment is null.
I think objectively, what I see is a building that has a forward front module that is of a different material, like a contrasting material and hue, where there is a simplicity to that form. However, everything connected to it, there is a broken form, deconstructed form, and a level of articulation that, as far as my eyes see, would allow me to move forward with this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think
If no one has a strong opinion on this. Okay. Is that fair?
Great.
Right on. This one is where we're getting next. All building facades facing public streets shall be designed with a similar level of design detail. Todd, if you take us to the front of your structure, please.
Can we do an elevation too? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, this one's great. Thank you. So let's give a quick intro. I wanna respect the affordable custom nature of the corrugated corten siding, the articulation of the entry, as well as the overhang recessed nature of the arrival. I've said before, I'm not going to be shy about my opinions. I think the ceramic gabion is absolutely fantastic in its creativity and the thoughtfulness there. I'm just going to go out on a limb. I'm going to put that on record. So I think just to kind of get things moving here, I see articulation. I see step downs, I see recesses. I think there could be if somebody wants to make a comment about the large face, I think that is, that's viable of the corrugated siding. But I appreciate the applicant's description of the play out with light, the variability in the folds. I think that lands very clear, especially given its face, southern face, and how the sun will play off of that facade. How does that land for you all, commissioners? Any concerns on this, on the facade, the way it meets the street?
My one and only concern on this is that we are using core 10, that is a core 10 surface, yeah? Rusted steel. My main concern is that if, budgetary reasons change that material, I would hope that, we could review that. That's my only concern. I think it's very well articulated. One of your employees can definitely help you fill some of those mugs. She has way too many. And yeah, I think it's well done.
If I may, please, Jesse.
Just wanted to ask a quick question. I appreciate the non-combustible material. I think it's a good approach to the building. Where would the address be for this building? Just to kind of contrast that building material up front.
In terms of the physical address?
Yes, sir.
The number?
Yeah.
It will occur somewhere on this canopy here near the front door, or perhaps this solid panel underneath that canopy. So,
Yep. Ken?
I have a comment / question. On that upper face, looked like there's variation in the metal that's used on that large expanse. Like there were 2 different types, I think. I just wanted to clarify that.
Fold patterns.
Okay, that's what, because at first I was like, oh, and then when I looked at the detail, I realized that there was more than just what I was initially seeing once I really looked at the close-ups. So I am not normally a fan of metal buildings, and you changed my mind on this one, so thank you.
Articulates much more.
Yeah. What Will did first run through, Will did last time. So it was yes. Thanks for getting back in there. I'm going to move on to the next, unless there's any objections. Okay. Architectural character of new buildings or additions shall complement the architectural character of adjacent existing buildings.
That's gonna be a tough one. So, yeah, so, I mean, what do we think about that?
I think it matches the building across the street. That's about it.
Okay, yeah.
But other than that,
that's adjacent. That is adjacent.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, you have tiny homes surrounding it.
I was surprised we didn't get any comments from the adjacent neighbors on the same side.
I thought the same thing.
Where are they? They said they have nothing to say.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that if nobody's here to say bargle bargle,
And I'm sorry, Jared.
The record, Kay.
We don't have time for your argle bargle tonight. Okay.
Previous meetings, the spellings there.
And just to confirm, Jared, we did not receive any written comments. Ellie.
Then I don't want to belabor that point, right? I think your point is well taken. It is, the building across the street is adjacent. It follows
it for me.
Suit, so.
But yeah, I'm good with it.
I'm gonna make eye contact down the row. All right. Last but not least, cornice required. within the maximum building height. A cornice shall be provided on each facade with a public street or pedestrian mall frontage to screen rooftop mechanical equipment. The cornice design shall be compatible with the historic character of downtown. The Historical Preservation Commission shall review said cornice design.
You go to that street view.
So again, what I'm remembering here is talking about the impacts of light and shadow with the overhang of the cornice
Cornice.
on the various facade materials and details.
And we've got a flashing cap.
That's flash.
So does that meet the definition of a cornice?
Come on, Kim, you gotta step in this sometime.
Well, does that is a good question. Does that qualify as a cornice, that cap?
I mean, I think it probably
But a
does.
cornice is top.
I mean, I would also point to the header in the window, which kind of creates that, additional articulation on the street front, which I think is pretty nice. Yeah, right. So let's look at this detail here. I mean, maybe, in praise of shadows, the cornice is expressed in shadow. So that negative space that's created, I think could also easily be defined as a cornice.
In the summertime, in the winter with low sun, of course, it'll go away.
I mean, yeah, certain times of day it'll go away, at night it'll go away. Maybe, I mean, well, then
We have a transformer cornice.
I think we could come up with a cornice here. In my opinion.
You're okay.
I'm good.
Kim, how are you doing?
Good. I've had some concerns about this building, which I expressed with HPC. And my biggest concern was not with the cornice. It was more that mass of the brown part of the building that looks almost like a container. And I was a little bit worried that the town would not receive that well. But one of my fellow commissioners commented that it actually does fit with the historical use of that part of town, like that it was industrial down at that end. And that was a pretty good comment. The other thing that I like is actually seeing the model here, because it really shows the depth, and the roof line over the entry, and it's a beautiful building. So I really don't have any further comments. I've come around to what my resistance was in the beginning.
I'm impressed. Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Moving on to, I think the next stop, Ellie, you'd like to just take is transitions between different land use areas. Is that correct? Stepping down, building height and mass along the shared property line to meet the height of the existing neighboring home along a minimum of 50% of the building's length. So this one, I think we can kind of leave it to simple math here, although I'm not going to pull out a scale and run it. I think my eyes tell me that the structure on the east, which will be maintained, is approximately 50%. Was there a problem with that? Did staff find? Okay. Does any commissioner here feel that there is they notice that proportion to be off, or?
Professional eyeballer.
Professional eyeballer. There we go. Stamped.
So it doesn't technically meet the 50% when you look at the numbers, but remember, you are looking at this from an alternative compliance standpoint.
Okay, sorry, forgive my ignorance on this. How does the alternative compliance play into, like, how are we supposed to, can you guide us on how to use the alternative compliance provision to get past this one?
Yeah, so in attachment F, which I don't know what page that would be for you guys.
The end.
The end.
Where we're going.
It runs through some finding of fact. So basically, we know that the proposed design does not fit 3 of these 4 things, which it has to in order to comply. But in order to find an alternative compliance, you have to find that it exceeds the intent of the code. So that's what you're debating. From what we're saying is that the setback is 21 feet from the western side. And if you determine that that is acceptable enough to exceed the intent of these 4 rules that the UDC sets out, then you could grant them an alternative compliance to these rules.
So is that where you're, are you spelling this out for us in the findings of approval, alternative compliance, 513E? Okay. So 1 through 4.
We have maybe I can help a little bit. So the strict interpretation kind of assumes that the buildings are really close together, and so it wants better transitions between a single story and a 2-story building. And so what, is being designed here is a building that's set further back, provides greater separation. And so the alternative compliance is basically saying that greater separation meets or exceeds the intent of 2 buildings right next to each other that's 1 story, 2 stories with very little setbacks or separations.
So basically to support rather than an abrupt transition with the 0 air gap. The air gap and where Todd has just shown us now, there are 3 different dimensions of offset between the western building.
I see. Okay.
Where if I remember correctly, the orange will be the lowest, which is the closest. Purple is where we begin to step up. And then the tallest portion of the building where the sawtooth is the green, which is furthest away. So if this commission feels comfortable with the transition, which is not at lot line or within the center and setback, then there is grounds for alternative compliance.
Okay, so that's number 1. It does.
Does it advance
Does
the
it-
goals and policies
It's
of the plan?
a package deal.
Okay, but I'm just on 1. So like, that's our job tonight to figure out this alternative compliance and everything else. Well, I guess everything else is subjective as well, but this is where we might run into an issue. So the design achieves the intent of transitions between different land use subject to standard to a better degree than the subject standard by increasing the building setback from the western property line from the 10-foot requirement to 21 feet. So it's doing a better job.
Right, so what we're seeing here, we're seeing in excess of 10 feet, we're seeing the use of sloping roofs to accommodate upper stories. We're seeing variations in the side building wall as far as its setback and articulation. So various massing devices to assist with the transition.
Okay.
And if this commission is comfortable with those design tools and devices to accommodate that transition, is the ultimate question. And if so, then alternative compliance is achieved.
Varying height and mass. Number 3, the increase. Okay. It's subject to standard greater separation between commercial and residential uses.
Come on, Jeff, say it out loud. I can't hear the voice on the inside.
Buck's gonna go to HCC at some point. It's like,
Mhm.
I know it's not in front of it. That's not what's in front of us. That's why but this whole transition between different zone districts is a point in time. This is all gonna be HCC at some point. I mean, I think the HCC also says the setback needs to be exactly 10 feet, right? It's not like a minimum or a maximum. It's being prescriptive. And we are saying the Clay Center's come up with a better idea for how this building fits on the block because they want little access and some outdoor space for events. When the Dean property goes HCC and redevelops, we'll have another design conversation. The town will have another design conversation over these setbacks and stuff.
You're addressing item number 4 under
Saying-
alternative.
I am saying that it advances the goals of the policies in the comp plan. I think it's creative. I think this use of space is great. I like the varying depth as a alternative for these straight line HCC buildings that are contemplated, yeah, I'm good with it.
Can I
Yeah.
offer a point, just clarity?
Mhm.
So our board member, Claire Green, spoke with Had Dean today, or yesterday, I can't, this morning. He knows about the application. He offered no objection personally. He's not here complaining about it. So just, it's worth noting that the current owner.
I think we've already noted that. I think what we're trying to do is not so much. I think we acknowledge that are no letters in the packet, and there's no one here with any negative
I
comments.
just wanted to be that clear about the Dean property in particular. Thank you.
Thanks. Does it meet alternative compliance? Yes.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Right. We just have to go through these exercises because we don't want to set a precedent here. We have it, it's just gotta do what we gotta do. Just be patient.
Ellie, what did we miss?
I don't think
That's the
anything.
end of it.
I'm gonna end on just a little bit of a zoom out comment. For those who've been in this commission for a while, we've heard the term funky get tossed around quite a bit. Some of us like it, some of us don't. Some of us don't quite understand how that can be applied to a town who some hold it dear in a positive, other, it's not always a term that is easy for us as a commission to apply. Something I've noticed tonight is an application that is coming to us as a bit of a gateway element on the east side of our downtown. And it's offering a different take on creativity, on Carbondale, on community. And where funky's always been hard for me, what hasn't been hard are those other words. And I find that very compelling in this moment. That the level of thoughtfulness, the level of community, the level of consideration for this space, for this use, not just internal, but external, circulation wise. And I just think that's really interesting, and it's a few of us have been here for a lot of years, and we've talked about some words that we really can't apply. And what I see here tonight are some very clear applications, and in where the code isn't meant exactly, there are creative attempts that I believe in many cases exceed the code and the requests. So I think on that level, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I think sometimes we have hard challenges in front of us, and I'm not saying that I'm not trying to push any commissioner here in any direction. I just think there's an interesting moment to acknowledge this application, and not just what it is in a form or in a structure, but also in its in a programmatic concept for this town and for our main street. So I appreciate all the effort from the application. Thank you for that. Thank you all for coming in tonight as well. So I think with that, are there any final questions from this commission? Are there any points that you want on the record to go up to BOT to be locked in with this?
I'd like to just thank you guys for bringing this in prior and giving us a heads up on it in August. I mean, it was really great to see the whole thing before tonight. Otherwise, tonight would have been even longer. So, thank you.
I think the one thing that I want BOT to look at in here, and this is something that was brought up by a few other people here, is that if you zoom out of the building, like it kind of feels like Willits. It feels like metal corrugated buildings. But if you zoom in and view the details that this team has provided, I think you see that it fits Carbondale a lot more than Willits. I think it's a really, I don't know, it's a difficult thing to have such a amount of corrugated metal for me personally. And I think if that is a concern for any of the Board of Trustees, I think just zoom in, look at the details they provided.
Which I think we literally realized tonight, just zoom in.
I would also just, it's corrugated fiber cement.
In
I think
some,
for the most
in some
part.
cases,
In
yes.
some cases, not all.
Some of it's folded metal, some of it's corrugated cement board, some of it's corrugated metal.
Okay.
Looking at the material.
Ellie, we cut you
elevations.
off. Did you want to say something? Okay. Any dissenting opinions? Yes, Anne.
Not a dissent. I just appreciate the thoroughness of your packet presentation. Thank you. And I like the uniqueness from each side of the building. And that's what does it for me. Because if it was the front facade on the other three sides, then I'd have a completely different opinion. But I think its uniqueness is good, because it is a modern building in a historic district, but I somehow don't have an objection to that, which surprises me. But I really do appreciate all of the design on it, really. I think it's really good.
With that, I will entertain a motion. Oh, yeah, Jesse, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you guys for bringing in the materials. It really helps to paint that picture for us. And I'm excited at the space coming into town. I think that's one complaint that I've heard from several folks in town is there's not enough room in that space to create and to congregate. So I think this is an exciting opportunity for the town. So I appreciate everyone being here and appreciate you guys bringing it together so that we can all review it. So thank you.
Yeah, it's really impressive work, honestly. And I could do story time with this crew for another couple nights. And Diane, your love for this place is amazing. And it's really because of people, this community, all you people who showed up and have made this happen. Like, thank you for bringing this kind of amazing, exciting project to Carbondale. It's why I love Carbondale, is because of all you.
With that,
can I move to approve resolution number 3, series of 2025 with conditions of approval listed, pages 6 and 7 of our staff packet?
second, Jeff to Jesse. There you go. And a vote.
Aye.
Unanimous, gets it.
Yay.
Congrats, folks. We're excited to see you guys go vertical. Yes. Yep. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Oh my God, they would have, the pitchforks are hiding.
Nice work. That was tricky.
We'll let them do their thing. Let's push on through.
Staff update.
What?
No
Nothing?
staff update.
Okay.
Commissioner comments.
Commissioner comments?
Not for me.
Any comments? Any comments? Noonan?
The only
Noonan?
comment I have again is what I was just mentioning to Nicholas. I think this is a great example. We're always asking for a mock-up board, and something this small I think is awesome for
I mean, the
people to bring in
detail
for
Kim
applications.
Pointed out was, you know, how it looks flat on the rendering with the little detail of the awning in the front. That's going out of style though. That might be the last one we ever see.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but and I know that there's some contention here around the, you know, placing the cost of images and things on applicants, but I think this is furthermore, I mean, not everybody can afford a model in this sense, 3D, but I think we've noted again, the value of an application with quality images and what that allows this commission to see and understand.
Quality renderings, a physical model, a mock-up. I think this was done perfectly for something of this, like on Main Street, of like what we're looking for. Yes.
Well, I would go as far as a project on Main Street. When we see, I think we saw a recent application for West Main Street that came back in. And this commission noticed and noted how just poor graphic quality impacted our interpretation of what we were seeing. And I'm not gonna get into the specifics of it, but I see some heads nodding, so I see some recollection around that. So I think there's just a point of note that we only have one Main Street in this town. And let's take care of it. And I think there is, I think it is a reasonable request of a Main Street applicant to provide us, this commission, with appropriate graphic materials to help us truly understand what our Main Street will look like with their solution. So, and I welcome any, if you don't agree, please, like, that's okay, speak against it right now.
No, I totally agree.
My opinion.
I just want to be really clear that regulation has become a serious problem for developers. And we don't want to deter. Really think what we've been tasked to do by Board of Trustees is find a way to smartly reduce regulation. Right? So for every one thing for every one piece of regulation that we do impose, we should think about several pieces of regulation to remove. I think that's what's being asked of us by Board of Trustees. And I think we should be, trying to find ways to make it easier for people to build housing in particular, specifically. This isn't that.
Right.
But that's my response.
Okay, yeah. Just for some perspective for this commission, on average, a rendering of those qualities will run you about $2,000 each. So for if any
minimum, yeah.
Oh, wait, yeah.
$2,000 to $3,000 per frame. So if you have questions around the impact to the applicant, that's what you're looking at per frame. So in this case, we saw about, I think there was 3 or 4 of those. So, that is a cost. And yet I believe if someone is looking to develop on our Main Street, it's probably the least of all costs.
It makes it so much easier for people like not being in the industry. If someone put blueprints and elevations in front of me, it's like hard to see what it's actually going to feel like. So I totally agree.
I know it's an ask, but I believe, or I will stand alone in saying I believe it's a small enough ask that we should be doing it, at least in our major metro areas, if I could call them that, which are Main Street and 133. They are our urban areas, highly urbanized areas.
Metro way.
Metro way. Just my 2 cents there. It really helped tonight.
I do agree with that. I think it's a fair thing to ask somebody of like, again, if you're on Main Street, what's another 2,000? But like, I think asking, and this is why I always clarify, is that if we're asking for a rendering or another visual aid, I try to clarify and give suggestions to like just even a model screenshot or an elevation or something that I can base this off of contextually. It's not, I understand if we ask for this image and we're like, oh, this isn't the brick that I think that's just a little,
well,
sometimes depending on like what typology, like if we go from a full rendering to a model screenshot, we have to remove materiality from our view,
Well, I just want to remind this commission on the food truck court, what the applicant came back to us with a very simple graphic that was nowhere near what we saw tonight. And I would put that in the 90th percentile of illustrations. Is that fair? What we saw tonight, where that was in the 20th percentile, and it was enough for this commission to feel confident about the arrival experience from the Catherine Store gateway. So it doesn't take much, And I think it can probably scale with the project.
Yeah. Scale with project.
So just some 2 cents there that helped us. Yeah.
I have a question for Jared. So, and I think you kind of touched on it, Jared, but, when they show us a board and all this great stuff, how are we protected so we don't end up with that bait and switch?
That's a really, and I was gonna, thank you. I forgot to bring that up.
Yeah.
We
So-
talked about this last time.
So one of the approval criteria conditions that we attach to nearly every approval is the other representations of the application in writing and presented at the public hearings shall be binding conditions of approval. And so in that instance, and also hearing Jared's comment about concern about lessening the quality of that material, if we see something that comes back that isn't those exact materials, similar to what we did with the West Main townhome projects, we'll bring that back and have a check-in with you guys, because there was clear conversation about those materials being integral aspects of the design approval and site plan approval.
Yeah, I do trust CCY to maintain their design standards. They usually follow through pretty well. But also comes down to how convincing a contractor is, which is why I wanted to voice my concerns about Core 10. Not once on a project that I've submitted Core 10 for has somebody said, we should get rid of that. That's expensive.
They actually corrected. They said, Will said it will not be Core 10, it'll be rusted steel. So they will probably treat the steel and they'll let it rust. It will not be Core 10.
Right, yeah, that also kind of concerns me,
But they did qualify that one.
I only care about that one rectangle changing, that's it.
Have a great spring break, everybody.
Yes, thanks,
guys. Peace, we're out.
Wait, we don't have staff comment?
I said we didn't have staff updates
don't have
during that. Sorry.
Thank you all for
Thanks,
staff.
Thank you.
It is so much fun when you're all here. There's no two-dimensional versions of me.
I hear you. I hear you.